All right, everyone. Sorry about that short notice right there. I realized I was supposed to sign up and get a stream going sometime today, and I was supposed to do that back on Monday, and life caught up with me. And I'm like, I just got to do it. What, we also get to, um, we also get to, post this up onto YouTube as well. So, it's not like the stream will ever disappear or anything. So, what are we gonna do? Welcome everyone. My name is Al. We're gonna do just a. I was showing off some things to some students about Game Dev HQ and how to basically make a ship move, and this kind of blew them away. I did this last week. I'm going to be continuing it with them this week, and I figured, you know what? I kind of want to share this with the rest of the world. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me close that so we don't get interrupted. But yeah, so I said, let's just do this on YouTube and have everyone watch this. So this isn't a advanced kind of course. This is more just a beginner's kind of intro course to how to set up something sort of like this with very little effort. And it kind of just introduces you to the basics of Unity, the basics of materials, objects, FBXs, some post processing effects, some simple animations. The other thing I wanted to do with this is to allow you as a player, if you press 1, the weapons come out, and if you press 2, the other weapon goes away and the new weapons come out, and you kind of swap between the two. So it kind of introduces you a little bit to the animation system as well. Oops, boom, boom, and that's a pretty sweet looking effect right there. Okay, so how the heck do we do this? We're going to start off with, let me go ahead and turn off my noise on my other computer so we don't hear those alerts. We're going to do this. We're going to just start up with a brand new empty scene, a brand new empty YouTube scene. And in here, I'm just going to create a plane because I want to recognize my floor. And you'll notice that it's a little dark. That's because in my lightings, my auto generate isn't turned on. Of course, you can find that in Windows, rendering, light settings, and all the way at the very bottom, or in the mixed lighting. Oh, right here, auto generate, and you can use that to turn on your light settings. So, where do we get these amazing sci-fi things? We get them from Filebase. Filebase is something that we created. We've been working on it for years and years. We built a brand new, a gorgeous library of assets in here. If you're curious to learn more about it, go to www.gamedevhq.com. And you can hop on and take a look at some of the assets on here. It's a plugin. It's not a web page. It's not anything like that. It's actually built into Unity. You download it from, let's see, it would be filebase.gamedevhq.com, and you can download it here, and it comes in as a package. And once you downloaded it, you drag it simply into your project window, and it imports the plugin. Once it imports the plugin, you click Filebase, click Open, and it opens Filebase. And if you are a member of Game Dev HQ, you are able to download these assets as much as you want. Now, what can we do in here? You can either browse through the latest assets, or you can go into this asset tab, or you could just type in, space ship, and it will pull up things for you. We are going to be fixing the search system so that's far more better pretty soon. But right now I can actually go into 3D. I want to go down to, let's say, vehicles, and I want to go to space. And I have 49 vehicles in here that I could use. So we got, your standard typical alien spaceship and stuff like that. I want to go toward more like these kind of ships right here. So I'm going to find one that looks particularly attractive to me. I'm going to go with this yellow one right here. Once you're a pro member, you can download as many as you'd like and go to your heart's content. It tells you the size. It gives you a little preview of what it looks like. I think it's going to be dope, so I'm going to hit download. It gives me my username, password. Once you're logged in and you're set to go, all you have to do is hit the download button, and this asset will download into your project. Now, this is one of import This is one of, it looks like 1,686 asset packages that we have on here. So we got everything from space to, sci-fi to urban environments, characters. It goes on and on. We just keep adding more every single week. So once it's in my package library, I could actually click here and kind of look at what's inside my library. And if I want to locate it real quickly, I just hit the locate button and it finds the asset in my scene. So I'm going to take this and kind of scoot this off to the side. Don't really need to see it anymore. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my space fighter and drop it in. And right now this looks like garbage. It looks like garbage because, we haven't done anything yet. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to scale this down. And let's see real quick. My model, it's set to Unity levels. It's a pretty big ship. It looks pretty cool, though. Let me take a look at that. That's pretty interesting right there. I kind of dig that. Okay. So we want to talk about how do we get it to have that cool like floaty space thing and have the guns come out and everything like that. So we're going to just kind of dive into that immediately. First thing I want to do, though, is I want to adjust my environment a little bit. I'm going to increase my plane size quite a bit. Stretch it all the way back there. And in here, I downloaded this sand texture, and this is on Filebase as well. I just looked up sand, downloaded the texture. I'm going to take this material, and I'm just going to drop this right onto here. And this particular sand texture, it's really, it needs some help. And that's because right now it's only tiling once. And because it's only tiling once, it looks like the ship is like the size of a peanut. So let's go ahead and increase the tiling to, let's say, 10 by 10. Sorry, that was stupid of me. Plane in here. 15 by 15. Let's do this 50 by 50. And that changes the tiling of the actual sand right there. Hello, everybody. Lunar4, Fancy Baby, Teja, Jimmy. Very, very cool. Thank you all for joining. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a plane. And I'm going to take this, move this back, and increase the size. And then I'm going to go to Window, Rendering, Light Settings. And in here, I want to add a fog. So I'm going to add a fog right there. And what this will end up doing is it just kind of blocks out this skybox right here. But it keeps the skybox for light setting purposes. So I'm going to drag this back here, increase the size, and I'll duplicate this as well. And yes, this recording will be here later if you want to check it out. So, I know it's Friday. Some people are still at work, and it's no big deal. So I'm just going to add that right there. And instead of having the fog be this gray, I want to maybe turn it kind of like an orange color, a sandish color. So everything kind of fades into the background. Okay, now there's some of you guys who are brand new to Unity3D, and you're curious, how are these models made? How are these models done? What is the deal with these assets in here? So I just want to give you a quick overview. Again, this is more of like an introductory tutorial. This is more of an introduction to everything. And so I just want to kind of show you kind of the hidden background behind what makes these assets work. So inside of each of our asset bundles that you'll get an FBX, a material, and a texture channel. If you go into here, this is your FBX. This is your file exchange format. And inside of it, you'll have your polygon view. You can see the triangle counts of this particular model. This model is completely unwrapped and ready to go. I don't think you can actually see the UV map on here, but the best way to explain what a UV map is imagine an Easter egg bunny that is wrapped in tinfoil, and you see like the face on it and you see the eyes. If you were to take that tinfoil and unwrap it, it'd be completely flat and it would have the texture on it. That's the idea of a UV map. It's a 2D texture that's overlaid onto this 3D model, so it knows where the gold parts go, it knows where the turret goes, etc., etc. Okay, so that's what this is. This is your FBX, and this is your UV for your FBX. Then you have your material. Now, people get kind of caught up in materials because they think that materials are kind of like in the 3D modeling world. And they really are. So you have your material, but each material is a specific shader. And sometimes you guys will be working in Unity, and you'll notice that sometimes it turns pink. And you don't understand why. It's because you're using a pipeline that doesn't accept that particular shader of that material. So if you were to look at, let's say in a 3D world, sometimes you have hair shaders and sometimes you have regular standard shaders. And this is kind of like in Unity. Sometimes you have mobile shaders and you'll have VR shaders and you'll have UI shaders and particle shaders, but then you'll add more like a universal render pipeline shader, or you'll add a high definition render pipeline shader. And if it's not accepted, it will turn pink, and that's why it does that weird thing. But if it is accepted, the properties will change. So if you could see right here, we have our standard shader right here. But if I go to, let's say, a specular setup, you'll notice that the metallic changed to specular, and you'll notice that actually my game object changed as well. It looks different. Or if I go to like a mobile shader and I just do a bump diffuse, you'll notice that it only takes 2 texture channels. The metallic isn't even there. The emission channel isn't even there. So depending on your shader, it changes what you can pipe into that shader for your material to be applied on your game object. So for us, we built ours in the PBR fashion. So the idea being that we have a color shader, which is your albedo. We have this channel, which is the metallic roughness, and this is a special texture. The metallic roughness has really 2 components to it. The RGB, these 3 right here, deal with the metallic. So the brighter it is, the more metallic it is. The less brighter it is, the less non-metallic. The more like getting into like carpet kind of idea that is. And then we have a roughness, and that roughness is the alpha channel. So if you compare the RGB right here to the alpha, it looks completely different because they are different texture sets. So instead of having one texture that's applied using all 4 channels, now we're actually splitting it up into using different textures for different channels in our color palette. So when you look at like an HDR pipeline, the HDR pipeline, it has one setting, I forget which one, the mast, I think, and on it it has, if I'm not mistaken, it contains your metallicness, your roughness, your ambient occlusion, and your height map. And so it would put like a metallic on your R, your roughness on your G, your ambient occlusion on your B, and your height map on your A. So one texture actually is 4 separate textures all combined. Kind of cool. But it's an excellent way because now instead of doing one texture at, let's say 2K, now you're doing and four textures for 4 separate channels. You're doing one texture for 4 separate. That's a lot more efficient. Okay, so we got this ship, and that's basically kind of explains, the textures in here, our mission, which is our color, and our normal channel, which is kind of like our bump channel. That's what you get in here. Now, what we want to do is we want to create this ship to kind of float on this environment, all right? So we're going to go create an empty game object. And I'm going to set my space fighter and my empty game object at 000. So I'm going to reset this. I don't like putting all of my play elements onto my main 3D object. And the reason is I like to swap out I like to keep all my logic on empty game objects and then just make my game object a child of it. Because really, this is just a mesh. There is nothing special about this mesh. But if I were to attach everything to this particular mesh, then I'm kind of married to it. Whereas if I attach it all to, let's say, a game object that's above it, so I'll call this space fighter position right here. I could attach my scripts to it and then just serialize a field that says, all right, this is the object you want to affect, and everything will still work. And then if I put a new object into here, I just have to change that serialized game object, and I could swap out this one game controller component for another game controller component. It makes life kind of easy. So, it's just something to consider as you're building your video games. Sometimes it gets a little crazy. Okay, so I'm going to create a second child, and I'm going to call this Space Fighter Movement. And this is just going to be a random movement of my Space Fighter. And this is exactly where, I could, set this to where it's going to, I could put a brand new mesh in here and swap out players and fighters. So in this one, I'm going to actually have this to be my center point of my ship. So I should probably move my ship down to the center point of this, and I'll move this up. So if I move this position, my center point will always adjust no matter what. My rotations will always adjust. So this is just going to be kind of just a random movement, and we're going to make this movement very simple. I don't want to make this complicated. So right now I'm going to add just an animation that's just going to be kind of like this random float for this ship sitting in this scene. So I'm just going to go create a animation. And now if you go to your project window, oops, I always do this. Let me delete that. Okay, if I go to my project window, I can go down here to animation, and I'm going to call this animation ship floating. And I'm actually going to package this all into a folder called YouTube, so I know where all my YouTube stuff is. I'm going to actually create another folder called animations, and I'm going to put this under ship floating. Okay. And so I want my ship to float with this space fighter movement null right here. So I'm just going to take this ship floating and drop it in there. Now, what is it going to do? It's going to create a controller. And when I first started getting into game dev, I always got confused between what is an animation and an animator. They sound exactly the same, but their functions are so different. So what is an animation? Animation is on this timeline, and you could find it through going to animation right here, right? And animator is right below it. Animation is kind of like a keyframe that you would do on a timeline. Move position here to move position here. The animator, which is this thing, which looks completely different, tells your game object which animation to play. So, if you want to think of it a little differently, imagine you have a PowerPoint presentation. Animator is that little panel on the side that shows all the slides that are available. And when you click on the slide and you press play, this is the animation that occurs to get all your text coming up. That's probably the best way I can explain it. So this is like your organizer for your animations, and this is your actual animation itself. Really simple way to look at it. Animator, animation. So in here, I'm going to select my space fighter. Now, in my space fighter, I can adjust anything in here that is on the same level or anything that's a child of here through this add property tool. So I have my space fighter. It has this space fighter and the ship floating animation. You can actually see the ship floating animation right here. And if I click this, I can affect the transform of my current space fighter movement Or I can even go down to its child and adjust the transform or the mesh renderer of this space fighter right here. And you could see how it sort of indents a little bit just to show you that it's the child of the parent object or your current object. I want to just adjust the rotation, and I want to adjust the position of my particular game object right here. Now, we have a timeline that's based on seconds, right? And this is a samples. The samples is the frames per second. So right now it's set to 60 frames per second. If you can push, and I think they call it samples because if you got a heavy scene, you're not going to do 50 frames per second or 60 frames per second. You may drop down to 30, or you may go over and you do like 120. So they just call it samples. It's kind of like where it's supposed to be. So I'm going to take this movement and I'm going to say, all right, I want this animation to span 10 whole seconds. So I'm going to go to a start and I'm going to go to a finish. And this is 10 seconds that I get to play with right here. Now, if you want to go to the end of your animation, there's this little fast forward arrow to move to the back or to the front. But if you want to, let's say, focus in on an animation in the middle, well, first of all, we got to create it. We were going to use these tools, which is the ones right that don't. There's just a single arrow versus the double arrow that lets you jump to previous or next keyframes. So in here, I'm just going to go randomly, and I'm going to hit the record button. Once you hit the record button, you got to make sure that you have the object that you have selected with the animation. I'm going to, just slightly move my ship. And I'm going to slightly adjust it rotation-wise. And you can see that it's got a keyframe attached to it. And then I'm going to go and take this down here, and I'm just going to adjust this, and I'm going to play it back. And now you can see that I got this like floating ship that took me, absolutely no time at all. And as I move my game position around, so I'm going to move my game over to the side right here so you can see it, and I'm going to make sure that my camera looks at the same spot. If I hit play, I can actually select my fighter position, and you can see, like, even though I'm moving the position of my ship around, it's still maintaining the float. And so it gives that nice little land speeder kind of thing going on that you would normally get with, let's say, a Star Trek kind of thing. Now, you noticed how it stopped. It stopped because I have the option to tell my animation, do you want to play once or do you want it to loop? And to do that, you got to go click on your animation, and right here it will say, I want to either loop the time. You could tell it how many cycles you want to offset it or whatnot. But right now, I'm just going to loop this, and what it will do, and you could see kind of here on your timeline, it's going to play all the way to the end, and then once it gets to the end, it's going to restart again, which it did right there. And now it's playing back, even though it doesn't like skip back. And in here, I could still grab this player movement, and you could see my ship kind of just rotating and doing whatever it needs in the scene as well. So really easy to do that kind of random looping animation on this. One of the other cool tricks that we did to get this, and I'll go back to this main scene. Is it sample scene? Yes. One of the other cool things we did when we made this scene is we added this smoke. And this smoke is actually really simple. The smoke, we're dealing with two different particle systems. And this little movement attached with the smoke can be really effective and look really cool for your scene. So I'm going to go back to my YouTube scene, and let's go ahead and add this smoke. Now, we could build it by hand, which is not that hard. It takes 10 minutes to do. Or we can go to Filebase and find a smoke asset that we want to use in our scene. So I ended up going into Filebase and I downloaded this smoke cloud. You can also go to your visual effects. Where is it? Particles. In particles, I could use this smoke cloud over here, or I could have grabbed a flame or a fireball or whatnot. I believe I used this smoke cloud 03. And so I'm going to click it and locate it, and it's already built and ready to go. It saves a lot of time. I'm going to go grab this prefab. I'm going to drop this into my scene. And you can see that this smoke cloud does exactly what it's intended to do. It creates this particle effect that does this smoke cloud all around it. It's really easy to take something like this and adjust it to make it do what I want it to do from here, because all the settings are already located and locked into it. So what I want to do is I want to change the emission. I don't want, or I'm sorry, the emission shape of this. I don't want this to be a hemisphere, which is what it currently is. See, everything is emitting out of this little sphere, and if I grab this sphere and I move it around, you could see that it's always stuck to that. I want to actually change this to sit at the bottom of the floor, so at 0, but I want to change the shape of the emission from a sphere to, let's say, a donut. And I'm going to adjust the radius of the donut to be something like this. And I want it to be like a ring around my ship versus just being a standard smoke cloud going up. Now, let's look at this smoke cloud. This smoke cloud is living a very long time. This isn't very exciting. So what can I do? I could change my start lifetime. So I could say I want this to live maybe 2 seconds to 3 seconds at most. So it's going to exist for a far shorter time. And then what I also want to do is I want to speed this animation up. Now I could do this by hand, by going into the values and adjusting durations, all this, but there's also the simulation speed thing. And if I set this to, like, let's say 0.1, you could see how slow the simulation becomes. But if I also set this to, let's say 5 or 3, now we could see the simulation going a lot quicker without us actually having to go in and get crazy with the individual details. Which is a really nice way to really realistically work fast, because, when you hear these 7-year deadlines, that's brutal. And then in here, I want to adjust the opacity. The smoke is really too strong. I don't want it as opaque as it is. I want to adjust the transparency. So in here, I'm just going to go to my alpha, and I'm just going to adjust this to where I notice the smoke, but it's not overwhelmingly powerful. I want it to kind of just push in and push everything out. And then I could adjust, little things like gravity modifiers and things like that, until I get that nice little ring and plume of smoke around my ship. Very simple to do. I mean, this took no time whatsoever. Now, let's say now I want to create the exact same I want to use the same smoke effect. And I'm going to use this in, let's say, this sample scene right here. If I press play, you could see that I have this like thruster smoke underneath it, kind of pushing the ship up. Well, I already have smoke. I don't want to redo this. I don't want to add another thing to this. I just want to adjust the current smoke that's under here, and let's make life easy. So I'm going to go to my prefab. I'm just going to duplicate this, and I'm going to call this smoke 3, and I'm going to call this under jet. You can call it whatever you want. And I'm going to take this smoke cloud, and it's the exact same smoke cloud that we were using before. But now this smoke cloud is not going to interfere with the other one. They're two separate things. So I'm going to actually turn off gravity on this. I don't want gravity to have any effect on this. I'm going to reduce the life to, let's say, 1 and 2. So it's going to be a short lifespan. And then I'm going to push the smoke out in a direction. So let's see. Where is the speed? Oops, let's go ahead and play. Let's see the start speed. And I want to change the shape from hemisphere to, let's say, what did we have this? A cone. And let's adjust the speed. And you see how now we're pushing this smoke out at this direction. Then I can actually change the angle at which the smoke will push out. So I will eventually push this back into the ship, but I want to visually see this. I do want to change the color of this. I think this dark is a little too dark. So let's go ahead and go into our color over lifetime, and I'm going to adjust this to lower the intensity of that. And what else can I do? I can go to texture sheet animation. That looks good. Let's just go ahead and adjust the speed of this sucker. So let's go like 5. And so now it's pushing out really fast. And I'm going to also, I really want to drop that intensity down a little bit more because the alpha channel is very strong. So I'm going to drop the alpha channel over here as well. And I'm going to also take this same jet and move it to the other side. Just like that. And then I'm going to take all of these and I'm going to take these two, the jets, and I'm going to stick them right underneath my fighter movement position. And now I'm going to press play. So now you can see that we have a combination, the smoke around the edge of the ship, and then we got this smoke underneath this ship, kind of pushing this bad boy up and giving it that really neat looking overall effect to it, which is really cool, you know. And this took absolutely no time whatsoever. I mean, our stream is 31 minutes long so far, and I've introduced this topic for the last 10, so this took us 20 minutes to do. So we got this thing going. I'm going to just adjust my directional light just a little bit. I feel like we're kind of getting a bad angle on this. And, you know, we can even go into, let's say, our space fighter, and we can adjust the metallicness of this a little bit so it's not so shiny. So it kind of smooths this out. And realistically, the final thing we want to do, and actually I'll drop this smoke cloud under here. And let's go ahead and play that back. And the color changed actually because the light direction changed. You can kind of see what happened there. But yeah, so if I end up taking the space fighter position, you know, I can move this around. Now you notice something that's kind of odd is that smoke is kind of moving around with the ship, which is not exactly what it's supposed to do, and that's okay. What you could do to change that is in smoke cloud, there is a area right here, simulation space. You could set this to local, which it's then on a local position, which is the space fighter, or you could set it to world position. And if I set it to world position, if I move my space fighter around now, you could see that it's not going to move the particles with it. And in fact, as I rotate to this area, it's going to start moving the particles with it as well. And that movement is completely because in here in the emission channel, I have a rate distance distance over there, rate over distance. I could, if I set this back to 0, you could see that that won't change. Oops, that won't change. And you get this kind of effect going on right here. So kind of cool, kind of easy to do. All right, so the final thing you guys want to do is you want this to look pretty. That's the only thing that you really want is to make this thing glow and pretty and shiny. And in order to do that, you're going to want to do some post-processing to it. Nothing spectacular. I want to find where the emission channel is. Okay, and I believe that emission channel is right here. You could see the yellow or the orange, I'm sorry, in the thruster. So we're going to play with the emission channel and we're going to add some post-processing. Now we're using the standard pipeline. So we're going to use the standard post-processing package. So if we go to our package manager, go in here, you can download the post-processing in the package manager. The post-processing for the standard and the universal render pipeline are practically the same, but they're set up differently. And the post-processing for the universal and the HDRP pipeline are completely different, but they're set up the exact same way. So bizarre the way they did that. But anyway, you can import the post-processing by going to Window, go to Package Manager, and import that, install that in. Once you get it, we will set up our post-processing. So in order for post-processing to work in the standard version of Unity, not URP or HDRP, what we want to do is we want to create an empty game object. And in here, we're just going to call this post. And this is where we're going to drop our post-processing volume. Now, it's easy to get confused. If you type in post, you get 3 different options. It's real easy to get confused. Which one do I use? The debug, the layer, or the volume? The volume, if you were to think about it, is the cube, because volume is a cube, that it hits your scene or is filling your scene. And the layer is what you put on the camera to decide which layer that's labeled post is going to be used as your post-processing. I don't really use the layer that much, but for volume, I could visualize, all right, I'm not going to drop a layer into my post. I'm going to drop a layer into my scene, and my whole scene's going to like swim in it. I'm going to drop a volume into my scene, and my whole scene is going to swim in that volume. So I'm going to attach a volume in here, and I'm going to turn on global. So in global, that means that this volume is going to affect everything in the scene. It's not just going to affect it's the environment inside, let's say, a box collider, where if you wanted one room to be cold and the other room to be hot, you could change the 2 volumes there. I want this to be global, and I'm going to create a new post-processing profile. And if I select this, you could see that here's the post-processing profile right there. Okay, so we're halfway there. The next thing we want to do is we want to click on our main camera, and we want to do an add component. And in this one, we want to choose layer. Now, layer is looking for what layer does the post-processing stick on. So in order to do that, you got to click on post, and in here, you got to click add layer. And you got to type out the name of your post-processing layer. So just write anything, write post, write what you like. Once you do that, you should be able to select your post game object and choose post. And then you can go to your camera again and say, hey, I want you to look for my post processing on the layer called post. There, you're done. So now when we go into our post layer, this is where we could start adjusting Unity. So I'd like to just use a vignette just to test out if this works. So if I hit all and I slap this intensity up to 1:1, you should see this right here. This is how you know your post-processing is working. Okay, so I'm going to remove this, and now I want to do some post-processing effects. Why do you use post-processing effects? Because it's just a standard now. Everybody uses it. If you don't use it, you're missing out on a ton of good stuff right here. So I'm going to add an ambient occlusion. I'm going to set this to all, and I'm going to set this to scalable obscurance. And actually, I should probably set this to multi-scale. My thickness is really big, though. Don't know if I want it that big. So got our ambient occlusion right there. Next thing I want to do is add a color grading. Color grading is fantastic. It's really going to blend your scene together. I'm not setting this to linear, so if I'm set to gamma, I can't really use the HDR ranges, so no big deal. Why do you use gamma over linear? Gamma you can actually use for online devices, iOS devices, WebGL builds. You can't use that for you can't use linear with those builds. But linear is commonly used for higher end devices, PCs, PlayStations, Xboxes, things like that. So, and the color, the way it sees color is a lot different. Tone mapping, don't need to worry. Temperature, I want to use this. Temperature, hot, cold. easiest way to understand it. Why do I like this? Is because at 0, my color is completely neutral, and I would like to add some influence of color onto my entire environment. By doing that, my skies turn more yellow. My ship turns a little more yellow, orangish, warmer, and it just kind of really blends that entire area together. Tint is just like a hue saturation change. It's similar to hue shift. I don't really use it that much. It's not too much control. Hue shift, I could change it all colors if I want, but I'm not going to use that as well. Saturation. Saturation is an interesting one because lately some people have been, of course you could desaturate or you can really blow out the colors, but sometimes it's kind of nice to desaturate it a little bit to give it more of a filmic look if you want to do that. It really depends, and also people like to almost decontrast it to give it more of that filmic look as well. So I mean, there's so many different ways you can go about this to really make your scene look good. RGB, these color mixers, these are really cool. Lift, gamma, gain, shadows, mids, highs. So I could adjust the colors in my shadows to make me look a little more bluish, and then pull the colors in the yellow out in my highlights, and then kind of balance in between. Get some alterations, and you could test to see did that color grading really help. And then from here, I'm going to go over to my emission channel, and if I go to bloom, I come on over to here and I go to all, I can adjust the intensity. So if I jack this all the way up to this much, it's really not going to do much. But if I say set it to 1, I can have my bloom just affect my emission channel. So if I go to my engine right here, I can go to my space fighter. I'll go down to my color emission, and I'll just increase the intensity. And you could see just by adding the intensity to that back emission channel, well, now we're getting something pretty cool here. We're getting this neat little effect where the items that were supposed to glow because of the bloom are now glowing because of it. So you see those little lights in the front? Those are now starting to pop out in the front. And that's really sweet. Sorry to disappoint you, T-Rex, but, get bent. And we can also go to post, and we can adjust the intensity of that bloom as well, and get something nice and pretty looking. So this is a fantastic introduction into how to make things look pretty in Unity with just a little bit of time and effort. You could see how we basically spent 30 minutes doing it, and boom, we've done this already, and it didn't take a whole lot of effort for us to do. All it really needed was some GameDev HQ assets and some post-processing effects and a little bit of a particle work and animation work. We didn't have to touch coding. We didn't have to touch C#, and we did everything we needed to do to get everything done. And also now, if we wanted to, we could create character controllers and actually have this ship moving around in scene, interacting with things, doing whatever we want it to do to have a legitimate game engine going right here. So it's pretty sweet, pretty easy to do, and I know you guys can take this a lot farther if you want. All right, that's all I got for today. It's just a real simple stream on how to do a little post-processing. I appreciate all the trolls that came in our chat, like Player704 and who else was there? T-Rex. I really appreciate you guys coming here because, you really were needed, and I don't care either. But for the rest of you who actually took something away from it, I appreciate it, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week, and I hope you learned something here and you're able to use it. This is Al. You take care. Have a great week, and I will catch you later.